disposition of zone change from B2 and R1 to I1, submitted by Sheldon Gant, Inc. for parcels 45 096206, 49 096207, and 49 45 096208. For second reading, are there any comments on that? Okay, hearing none, the next one's from Council of the Whole. An ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 41, 2014, establishing the authorized strength, hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration for the Planning and Zoning and Economic Development Departments for the Village of Lordstown, effective November 1st, 2014, and declaring an emergency. I'd like to see this go second reading. Are there any other comments?
Yes, Mayor. I'll be making a motion to amend this. If everybody would turn to page 16 in their packet, I'll explain why. On page 16, where it has the wages of the Assistant Planning and Zoning Administrator right at the top of the page, the wages in your packet are correct, but this ordinance had its first reading when we started going over all the wage increases and stuff, and we made that adjustment to coincide with all the rest of them, and it had already had one reading, so I'd like to amend it to show the reading that what's there is accurate.
Okay, do that on the regular meeting.
Yes, I will. I just wanted to let you know what was taking place.
Okay, any other comments on that piece of legislation? Next one's from the Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 91, 2013, establishing the authorized strength, hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration of the Street Commissioner, Parks, Grounds, Building Superintendent, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency. Comments?
All these ordinances coming out of the Negotiating Committee can just go first reading tonight.
Even that one? From the Streets Department?
That's for the Street Superintendent.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Other comments on that? The next one's for the Negotiating Committee, and that's from the Lordstown Volunteer Fire Department. Same, first reading, John?
Yes.
Comments? The next one's from Finance Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with the Office of the Public Defender of Trumbull County, Ohio, to represent indigent misdemeanors charged with violation of Lordstown Village ordinances, and that is for a year. We enter that every year. It's nothing new. What's council's pleasure on this? Would they like to pass it this
I would like
evening?
to see that passed tonight, Mayor.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, the next one's from Council of the Whole for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 94, 2013, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and terms of remuneration for the streets, parks, buildings, and grounds employees of the Village of Lordstown, effective January 1st, 2014, and declaring an emergency. Comments?
I'd like to see this passed tonight.
Any other comments? Okay, the next one's from Transportation, Senior Services, Planning and Zoning, and Recreation Department Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 23, 2014, establishing wages and terms of employment for Lordstown transit driver and substitute van drivers, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency. First reading also?
Yes,
yes.
it's going to be amended too.
Well, I don't think it needs to be amended. I would like to have it changed right now during caucus because somehow it got through the title says from Transportation, Senior Services, Planning and Zoning and Recreation Department Committee, and it should be changed to read the Negotiating Committee.
Mr. Mayor, the one above it we just covered, should that not be January 1st of 2015?
No.
No.
No, it needs to be in effect.
Oh, yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Next 8 are from Negotiating Committee, and they are pay ordinances. We're all going first reading. Are there any comments on any of those from the Negotiating Committee? Hearing none, the next one's from the Board of Public Affairs, and that is the hourly wage ordinance where council will ratify what the Board of Public Affairs has done. The first reading also?
I'd like to see that go emergency. Pass
Emergency?
tonight.
Any other comments on that? The next one's the master benefits ordinance from council as a whole, establishing employment provisions and fringe benefits for all employees of the village of Lordstown with the exception of the hour employees of police and fire. Comments on that?
That can go just first reading.
Any other comments? Next is from Finance Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance authorizing the clerk to make necessary appropriation budget revisions pursuant to additional revenue received in the amount of $28,100 and declaring an emergency. Comments?
I'd like to see that passed emergency tonight.
Any other comments? Hearing none, the last one's from Utility Committee for emergency passage, a resolution authorizing the Village of Lordstown to extend water utility service to Joanne Vanetti at 8973 County Line Road in the Township of North Jackson, Mahoning County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the Utilities Committee would like to see that passed as an emergency tonight. The EPA has already passed it and asked us to do that.
Okay, any other comments? Hearing none, are there any questions on the bills? Hearing none, are there any questions on the minutes in front of you for disposal this evening? Hearing none, is there anything council would like to discuss while we're still in caucus?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just to let everyone know and inform everyone that I'm going to, during the regular meeting, under new business, I'm going to make a motion that we authorize the miscellaneous expenditures for repairs on a Kunkel building. We already have the money, it's already been appropriated for that.
Okay, anything else council would like to discuss while we're in caucus?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask Mr. Blank if he'd received anything yet from Office of Elderly Affairs on the nutrition
Yes.
site.
We got
You
that.
got that?
I got that Thursday or Friday, correct, Bill?
Great.
But it was too late to put in the packet this week.
Well, that's okay. I will have a committee meeting and agree to bring it in. And
We got that Thursday or Friday.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else council would like to discuss at this time before we adjourn to caucus? Okay, caucus is adjourned. I'd like to open the Lordstown Village Council meeting. Welcome everybody this evening. Would please stand and join me for the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Bill, if we got a roll call, please.
Mayor Hill.
Present.
Mr. Bond.
Here.
Mr. Mansell. Present. Mr. Ratcliffe.
Present.
Mrs. Jones.
Present.
Mr. Shealy.
Here.
Mr. Reader.
Present.
Clerk Klein present. Treasurer George Evelyn.
Here.
Matt Van Such. Here. Police Chief Brent Milholm. Fire Chief Travis Deastam. Parks, Buildings, Grounds Street Commissioner Dale Grimm.
Present.
Recreation Marty Gibson.
Here.
Board of Public Affairs.
Here.
Chris Kajalik. Municipal Engineer.
Present. Entertain a motion to excuse Mr. Milhone. He was off this day on vacation day, and Travis Easton, he's still on second shift. Entertain a motion to have those two excused.
So moved.
Moved by Jones, second. Second by Shealy. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Jones, second.
Second.
Second Bond. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion for disposal of the minutes. The public hearing held September 15th, 2014, and the regular meeting held September 15th, 2014.
So moved.
Moved by Reader, second.
Second.
Second Shealy. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion for payment of the bills.
So moved.
Moved by Jones, second. And everybody be shy now. Mansell, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I have no mayor's report this evening. Is there a clerk's report?
No report, Mayor.
Any questions for Bill? Solicitor's report?
I have no reports tonight, Mayor.
Any questions for Matt? Treasurer's report?
No report.
Any questions for George? Board of Trustees of Public Affairs report?
Just that we have that one piece of legislation we'd like passed tonight.
Any questions for the board? Village Engineers report?
Real quick, one item is the construction project on State Route 45 for the water line relocation. The Lordstown bore and casing is installed, and also the Warren bore and casing is installed. They had to be done simultaneously to keep the CSX inspector on site so that we wouldn't have any other delays with that. So they're going to be doing some work on the Warren water line outside of the bore and casing. We won't be on site to inspect that. We'll only be on site to inspect the Lordstown water line work. So we'll be sending you an update of what the rest of the project schedule is. Any questions?
Chris? Okay, special reports. Police Chief Milholm is not here this evening. Fire Chief Easton is not here this evening. Parks, Grounds, Building, Street Superintendent, Mr. Grimm.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Highland Avenue North has been paved. They're almost complete with that job. The paving is complete. They still got to come out and paint the lines and stuff. And then that job will, once they get the lines painted, the paving portion of it will be complete. And they will be coming back to install the guardrails, hopefully starting out this week, weather permitting. That's all of Highland Avenue, replacing the guardrails. The other ODOT project, Palmyra, from Hewitt Gifford to Bailey Road, they started milling that today. They expect to be milling today through Wednesday, and then probably start paving on Thursday on that project, and hopefully be done paving by the end of the week on that project. Our local paving, they have Palmyra from Bailey to Salt Springs milled. All of Halleck Young is milled. They're waiting for the weather to cooperate here a little bit so we can get the chip seal down. They have to have no rain and dry conditions and 50-degree weather for minimum of a couple days they prefer. But so hopefully we can get that so we can get the chip seal down, and then as soon as they get the chip seal down, they'll finish the paving on that. Bacher Road is complete. So the paving projects are moving right along, and other than that, I put a appointment in everybody's box last week. We had 23 resumes submitted, and I appreciate your support on the appointment tonight.
Any questions for Dale? Okay, Recreation, Marty.
No report.
Any questions for Marty? Okay, Bill, do we have any correspondence this evening?
No correspondence.
Okay, public remarks. If you'd like to make a public remark after I acknowledge you, please come to the microphone and give your name and address so we can get it recorded in the minutes correctly. Public remarks? Yes, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce Filarski, 6821 Highland Avenue. I am here to thank Don Reeder, Dale Grimm, and the town and the road department for the job that was done at the end of my driveway. I am very happy with it, and if anyone drives by my place, look at the end of my driveway. What a nice job they did for me, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Are there any other public remarks at this time? Okay, hearing none, are there any council remarks? Hearing none, go on to committee reports. Finance, Mr. Mansell.
Yes, Mayor, there's two pieces of legislation tonight from the Finance Committee that I'd like to see both of them passed emergency. Like I mentioned during caucus, the 11 coming out of the negotiating committee, they can just go first reading. And then the one from council as a whole, I would like to see for the street department passed tonight, and the one for the BPA is the BPA members mentioned they'd like to see that passed tonight.
Okay, any questions for John? Okay, Parks, Buildings, Grounds, General Improvements, Streets and Sidewalks, Mr. Reader.
No report, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions for Don? Public Safety and Welfare, Mr. Radka.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. A couple things real quick. We had our committee meeting on the 25th of last month. We gave fire chief, permission to go ahead and spend $25,000 on hazmat supplies and materials to equip our new hazmat trailer that we got from Halcone. Also, we received a FEMA grant of $25,935 for data terminals for the fire department, and we have a 10% match on that. So that was a pretty good deal for us on that. And lastly, the siren on Bailey Road, I spoke with Mr. Dunn this morning again. The charger for the battery shorted out, burned the batteries out. The batteries have been replaced. We're waiting for the control board to put back in the battery charger to get that up and running, and hopefully it should be done by the end of the weekend. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ron? Public Utilities, Mr. Bond.
Yes, just as I mentioned earlier in caucus, the ordinance commencing on page 149, I'd like to see that passed as an emergency tonight. The DPA has asked us to do this so they can extend the service to a Jackson Township resident who already is getting the sewer service and the water service, and we'd like that passed. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Bob? Transportation, Recreation, and Senior Services, Mrs. Jones.
Yes, we will be having a meeting soon to bring the legislation in for the nutrition site. I understand, did you get the title for the van?
I got the title for the van. We had a meeting for the Lordstown CIC. Mr. Blank got the title, went down and had the lien canceled, and I signed it, and it is now in the village's name.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Karen? Okay, Bill, we can have the first piece of legislation.
From Planning Commission for second reading, an ordinance affirming or reversing the recommendation and report of the Planning Commission to deny the petition for zone change from B2 and R1 to I1 submitted by Shelton Gant Inc. for parcels 45-096206, 45-096207, and 45-096208.
Are there any comments on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's had its second reading. Next, please.
From council as a whole for emergency passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 41, 2014, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration for the planning and zoning and economic development departments of the village of Lordstown, effective November 1st, 2014, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation?
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend this piece of legislation on page 16 so that it will reflect the pay increases that it shows on page 16.
Okay, everybody heard the motion from Mr. Mansell.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Jones. Comments or questions on the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Radcliffe?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried for the amendment. Are there any other comments on this, or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's had its second reading. Next, please.
From negotiating committee for emergency passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 91, 2013, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration for the street commissioner / parks, grounds, and building superintendent, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's had its first reading. Next, please.
The negotiating committee for emergency passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 8, 2014, establishing the authorized strength, setting the hourly compensation, and other terms of remuneration and conditions of service for members of the Lordstown Village volunteer fire department, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare this ordinance has its first reading. Next, please.
From Finance Committee for emergency passage, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with the Office of the Public Defender of Trumbull County, Ohio, to represent indigent misdemeanors charged with violation of Lordstown Village ordinances, commencing January 1st, 2015, and ending December 31st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation?
Motion to suspend the rules.
Motion to suspend by Mansell, is there a second? Second by Shealy, roll call, please.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to adopt? So moved. Moved by Radka, second?
Second.
Second by Reader. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to adopt. This is ordinance 74, 2014. Next, please.
From council as a whole for emergency passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 94, 2013, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and other terms and remuneration for the streets, parks, buildings, and grounds employees of the Village of Lordstown, effective January 1st, 2014, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation?
Move to suspend.
Move to suspend the rules by Jones, second.
Second.
Second by Shealy, roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Mansell, second.
Second.
Second by Shealy. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Vaughn?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays, motion carried to adopt ordinance 75, 2014. Next, please.
The Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 23, 2014, establishing wages and terms of employment for the Lordstown Transit van driver and substitute van drivers effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's at its first reading. Next, please.
From the Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 95, 2013, establishing the authorized strength for salary and other terms of remuneration for the full-time Assistant Income Tax Administrator's position in the Village of Lordstown's Treasurer's Office, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's at its first reading. Next, please.
Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 103-2013, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration for the clerk's office staff within the Village of Lordstown Clerk's Office, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's at its first reading. Next, please.
The Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 92, 2013, establishing the salary and other terms of remuneration for the full-time clerk's assistant position at the Village of Lordstown Clerk's Office, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Are there any comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's at its first reading. Next, please.
The Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 1, 2014, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration for the part-time dispatchers in the Village of Lordstown, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's at its first reading. Next, please.
The Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 104, 2013, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, terms of remuneration, and rules governing the operation of the Village of Lordstown Auxiliary Police Department, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare its first reading. Next, please.
The Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage, an ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 102, 2013, establishing the authorized strength, the hourly wages, and other terms of remuneration for the Police Dispatcher Department within the Village of Lordstown, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it had its first reading. Next, please.
The Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage. An ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 2, 2014, establishing the authorized strengths, the salaries, and other terms of remuneration for the full-time administrative employees of the Police Department of the Village of Lordstown, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it had its first reading. Next, please.
The Negotiating Committee for Emergency Passage. An ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 96, 2013, establishing the authorized strengths, the salaries, and other terms and remunerations for the part-time administrative employees of the Fire Department and the Recreation Department of the Village of Lordstown, effective January 1st, 2015, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it had its first reading. Next, please.
From Board of Public Affairs for emergency passage. An ordinance amending and restating ordinance numbers 20, 2012, 6, 2014, and 42, 2014, ratifying resolution number 2014-10 of the Board of Public Affairs, establishing the hourly wages and other terms of remuneration for the employees within the Board of Public Affairs pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 731.13, to be effective retroactive to January 1st, 2014, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation?
Motion to suspend the rules.
Motion by Mansell, suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vaughn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carried to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Radka, second.
Second.
Second by Reader. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carried to adopt ordinance 76, 2014. Next, please.
Council as a whole for emergency passage. An ordinance amending and restating ordinance number 90, 2013, the Master Benefits Ordinance, establishing employment provisions and fringe benefit for all employees of the Village of Lordstown except for the hourly employees in the police and fire departments, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation? Hearing none, I declare it's at its first reading. Next, please.
From Finance Committee for emergency passage. An ordinance authorizing the clerk to make the necessary appropriation budget revisions pursuant to additional revenue received in the amount of $28,100 and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation?
Motion to suspend the rules.
Motion by Mansell, suspend the rules. To a second. Second by Shealy. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carried to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Jones, second.
Second.
Second Radka. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carried to adopt ordinance 77, 2014. Next, please.
The Utility Committee for emergency passage. A resolution authorizing the Village of Lordstown to extend water utility service to Jillian Benetti at 8973 County Line Road in the Township of North Jackson, Mahoning County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Comments or motions on this piece of legislation?
Move to suspend.
Move to suspend by Jones, second.
Second.
Second Bond. Roll call, please.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carried to suspend the rules. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Radka, second Bond. Comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Shealy?
Yes.
Mr. Reader?
Yes.
Mr. Radka?
Yes.
Mr. Mansell?
Yes.
Mr. Bond?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
6 ayes, 0 nays. Motion carried to adopt Resolution 22, 2014. Is there any old business council would like to discuss at this time? I guess the only thing I have, I won't say whether it's old or new, but since we went first reading on all these packages and talking with the clerk, the ordinances aren't going to be changing. Bring them in for the next 2 meetings so Bill doesn't have to wipe out more trees to make these packets every week.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all I have under old business. Is there any other old business at this time?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, one thing, just to remind everybody up here, we have the drug and alcohol policy that we're going to have to review through negotiating committee. I put it in everyone's box, so
everyone gets a chance to look at it over the next few weeks, we'll be having a meeting.
You got mine back?
I got your copy, Karen. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anything else under old business? New business. I'd like to go first for a recommendation from Street Commissioner Dale Grimm. I'd like to have Al Joyner appointed to the full position, which was vacated by Kenny Heasley. I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Moved by Jones, second.
Second.
Second by Radka. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Also, upon the recommendation of Street Commissioner Grimm, he'd like to have Martin Eller appointed foreman over the Streets, Parks, Buildings, and Grounds Department. As everybody knows, Dale will be off for approximately a month for surgery, so ordinance was passed earlier. Dale would like to have Martin Elder appointed to the foreman's position.
So moved.
Moved by Jones, second. Second by Shealy. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there any other new business council would like to discuss at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we authorize miscellaneous expenditures of up to $75,000 for repairs at Conkle Building.
Everybody heard the motion by Mr. Reader. Is there a second to that motion?
Second move.
Second by Radka. Comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Is there any other new business at this time? Hearing none, are there any additional public remarks this evening? Jerry?
Jerry, after 2036 Salt Springs Road, concerning the parks. I just want to know, I mean, the clock's nice, the little stone wall, but I always known that to be Founders Park. So now it's Central Park, so where did Founders Park go? I mean, where's that at?
Okay. What happened, Jerry, when there was original park there where the monument is for Founders Park, with the pavilion and all that, that was the original Founders Park. And then when council 25 years ago or whatever bought the rest of the land, that actually became Central Park. And there's still a Founders Park, which is a small park where the monument and the pavilion is. The Central Park is the rest of the park, which was created after the village was created, when it was Founders Park. That's why that says Central Park.
All right. I tried to clarify it, so
I've had a lot of people ask me about that, because a lot of people do know Founders Park, but Founders Park was a very small portion of that. It had been 100 by 200, I don't know what the original dimensions were, but that was the original Founders Park. And then when they bought the rest of it and created the big park, it technically wasn't a part of Founders Park, so they always called it Central Park. And John, do you know when that happened?
The dates are up there, but I think there was criteria for us to become a village and stuff, and we had to have a park, and that Founders Park was the pavilion, and I think it was 2 acres, 1 acre of property to have the criteria for us to go into being a village and stuff. So that's the Founders Park. There's actually like a monument just to the west of the pavilion that has the dates that it was established and everything and stuff, and that's still Founders Park. Then the Central Park is the property down at the intersection.
Well, so if somebody wants to make to use say the bandstand area or the part of the park for a party, so you go by Central Park instead of Founders Park?
No, the pavilion would be Founders Park.
Well, the pavilion's Founders Park.
The pavilion is in Founders Park.
The gazebo is in Central Park.
Right.
I don't think so.
All right, well, at least I clarified it, so, because I had a couple people ask me, and I said, I really don't know for sure. So, all right.
Because the rest of the park was bought after the village was formed, and the village was formed because of that one small park. So basically, Founders Park is a small part and separate entity of Central Park.
Okay. Non-essential parks. All right, thanks.
Park inside the park. Okay, there's a, Tom.
Tom Dietz, 2821 Halleck Young Road, to help Jerry out from the little stone wall that's up there over to the big trees to the fire station and back to about the creek area, I believe it is. That is your Founders Park, because the fire station is over as far as it can go on Founders Park. Okay, but the big trees to about the stone wall. And from the road, I believe it runs back towards the creek.
Where it drops off right there.
Yeah, that's the drop-off right there, right behind the pavilion. Okay?
Yeah.
Is that clearer than mud for you?
Yes.
Okay, are there any other additional public remarks? Mary Jane.
Mary Jane Wilson, 7723 Highland Avenue, Lordstown. As I went through the meeting tonight and the list of bills, I have a question on page 11. King Sanitary Services LLC, $2,773.19. Now, I did some questioning a month or two ago, and I think this had some bearing with that questioning. But I'd like to know what this money was spent for. That would be under the Utilities Committee, I gather?
That was under the BPA.
That was BPA.
Well then, yeah, I understand that, but what was it for?
We would not know that, Mary Jane. We
No.
approve their bills. Council approves their bills, and, I believe you'd have an inside track on that one.
I do. I do indeed. I went past some of the pumping stations, and they were being pumped by Mr. King Sanitary Services a few months ago. When I inquired why were the pumping stations being pumped, they said they were full of sludge. Now, we have one pumping station that's rather close to General Motors. The other pumping station's at the bottom of Highland and Halleck Young, and the other one is up on the Kibler property, or close to it, in Brunstetter, Highland and Brunstetter. Now, if they had to pump the one by General Motors and the one at Highland and Halleck Young, where'd all the sludge come from? That's my question. There's hardly any business there.
I can answer that question for Mr. Mayor. Whenever Imperial tied into the sanitary sewer back in July, we were permitted through the EPA to empty the activated sludge in our systems into the sanitary sewer of the village. During that process, some of the sludge settled in the bottom of the pumping pits, which Bruce, our sanitary superintendent, had concerns with. So we made arrangements through Bruce and the BPA to have them 4 pump stations pumped out at Imperial's expense.
Well, then what's this $2,773 on here for?
Because it ran through the bills of the BPA, because Kings would not do the job for the village through a third party. So it had to be performed for the village, being reimbursed to the village, or to the BPA through Imperial.
And you voted to pay them? Isn't that a little bit of conflict there?
Yes, it is. I did not notice it on there.
No. I did. But I can't understand when we hooked into the sewer, or the individuals or the businesses, and they had their septics blown up or whatever, and the sludge had to be taken out, every person had to pay their bill to have the sludge taken out of their septic tank and then have it closed in.
You're correct.
That's true. Okay. So then, why didn't the trailer park pay to have its taken, but not put in, it should have been hauled away? That would have been a terrible burden. How many trailers are up there? 300 going into our septic system. The sludge that was taken out of, to me, the sludge that was taken out of your processor up there should have been hauled away, not dumped into our sewer. It caused a big problem.
Like I said, through the permitting process, through the EPA, we were permitted to do that. Through permission of Bruce, was well aware of the procedure that we were doing. It was okayed. We found out we had a problem during the process. It was halted. The rest of the sludge was hauled to Warren by another sanitary sludge hauler.
What other sludge? I thought we dumped it into our system.
Once we noticed that the problem was
Oh, you
coming...
mean then we had to clean out our
It was-
system?
No. Once the problem was noticed, we stopped pumping into the village's system. The rest was hauled through Duke Sanitary. What was pumped into there was accounted for, billed to Imperial for that treatment of that water. No sewage has gone through there without a record, and the EPA being accounted for the monies. So,
And what did the trailer park pay? How much?
I don't know the total bill off the top of my head.
I'd like to know it.
I'm sure you can find out from Cindy. She has all that invoice.
I know that's my daughter and that's what everybody thinks, but I don't have to go to her. I'm here talking to you.
I don't have that for you.
If this is a private issue for...
It's not a private issue.
No, hold it. If his bill, what he pays somebody to get the sludge out of his tanks, I don't think that's a public record for you.
No, what he paid to have the sludge dumped into our system is public.
Maybe the BPA might have
Is
that
it not?
information at their disposal. I do not have it with me. I'd be lying to tell you a number, Mary Jane.
Okay, thank you. But I believe that was very wrong.
Are there any other public remarks? Bob?
Mr. Mayor and Council, I'm Bob Montgomery. I'm one of the original...
Give your address, Bob, so we
Pardon?
can give your address so we can get in the minutes.
361 Brunstetter Road. I'm one of the original founders of Lordstown Village. I was on the committee when we formed up. It was just a bunch of us people, maybe 25 or 30, for the betterment of the community, because we heard Warren wanted to come out and annex the plant. So we just formed this committee, and we had meetings. We worked hard to get enough money to pay attorney fees, and et cetera. And advertising, we had our meetings, and we had to come up with either population density or park to incorporate. Now, the state statutes didn't designate what kind of a park. It could be just a set of swings for kids. But anyway, that's what we decided. So then we had to pay fees to have it surveyed. Well, rather than that, we thought, well, we'll use the center line of Salt Springs, Bailey, and Halleck Young, but how are we going to get this way? But we used a section line right along the administration building. That was our initial ground for the incorporation. So we incorporated around the park that we had in the center. And I can't understand when we done it was for the founders. That's what it was to be called, Founders Park. And I can't understand how Central got in there. If you're going to, the village annexed the rest of the township at that back then, and why couldn't the village annex the rest of this park and call it Founders Park? Because that's basically what we incorporated on.
Well, they probably could have. I didn't call it Founder's Park or Central Park. All I know is, the history I know, that was not an original part of Founder's Park, so technically, having that sign Founder's Park up there would not be correct, because that is not a part of the original park.
May I say something?
Yeah.
It's my understanding that Central Park was purchased on a grant that the community got, and it could not be combined with Founder's Park. Federal regulations, however, wherever that grant came from, said it had to be its own park. And so that's why we have Central Park and Founder's Park, and they're right smack next to each other.
Well, how come there's a sign Central Park in Founder's Park?
No, it isn't in Founder's Park. Founder's Park is down this way, closer to the fire station. It does not front on Todd Avenue. It only fronts on Salt Springs Road.
Well, back then, we didn't interpret it that way.
Well, I know my dad and my mom were both on that committee as well.
What's her name?
Stalker, Howard Stalker.
Oh, okay.
And that was Founder's Park there. It was right beside where the community room for the fire station is. And it went back in there.
Well, I guess I got shot down then.
No, you didn't get shut down, Bob. We're just stating, the facts as we know it. I don't think anybody here was back involved with that when that became a park to be Founder's Park, but the corner is not designated, from what I've been told, as Founder's Park. That's designated Central Park.
I always interpreted it as Founder's Park, and I think a lot of people, a lot of them deceased now, but when the committee was formed, that's what we assumed was Founder's Park, the corner.
I don't think the village own the corner when that happened.
No,
I don't know.
no,
They didn't own that corner then.
No,
Mary Jane?
it was sold to the oil company.
Let's come to the microphone, Mary Jane.
That was,
Make it short as that.
I was on council at the time, okay? Founder's Park was 1 acre, and it was in the 1 square mile of the incorporation of the village. And then the rest of the village was annexed a year later. I think it was in 1976. But when I was on council, there were 3 properties on the corner. The old gas station, the house, and then further down. And we picked that up on a 50-50 grant from ODNR. And within the grant, we had to name a park. Central Park. That was the easiest at the time. So, in our grant applications that was handled by our engineer at the time, that's how we got the park. We purchased through a 50-50 grant through the Ohio Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think basically everybody's saying the same thing. We're just coming from different areas to get it resolved. Are there any other public remarks? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Jones, second. Second, Shealy. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.